is not often that I meet people who are familiar with the Mexican Repatriation Act, which was in effect from 1929 until 1936. My guest tonight, Elisa Gonzales, is going to talk to us about that, and she's also going to sing about that. Elisa Gonzales is an actress, singer, writer, and professor of voice and acting at UMass Amherst. Welcome. Bienvenida a Tertulia. Welcome.
Muchísimas gracias.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So what we are going to do is we're going to first talk about the Mexican Repatriation Act itself, and then we can go also into your family's personal experience about that. So tell me about this Repatriation Act. What was the reason given for this act that was enacted by President Hoover?
Yes. It's a really tragic part of American history that unfortunately is more often than not swept under the rug. It's not part of the historical narrative that students are taught. I certainly was not taught about repatriation in my history classes. But as you mentioned, it was in effect from 1929 to 1936, and this all happened during the Great Depression. The American government, specifically the Hoover administration, they were looking for a scapegoat, essentially, to blame the economic troubles that United States citizens were experiencing, and an easy scapegoat were immigrants, and specifically the Mexican and Mexican American communities. They were under the false impression that immigrants were taking jobs away from hard-working Americans, that they were, bleeding their local governments dry of taxpayer dollars. And so the solution was to get rid of them. And so this was done forcibly through deportation. And this was also done through fear-mongering to the point where they were actually offering Mexican nationals, and Mexican American citizens the opportunity to repatriate themselves. It's also important to note that this was done in complicity with the Mexican government.
Is that right?
Yes.
How so?
Yes. The specifics I don't remember, but it was a joint effort between the Mexican government and the American government.
Oh, I was not aware of that part.
Yeah.
What I was aware of is that this is not taught in the history books in the school. I was looking at a survey that was done in the year 2006, and I learned that out of 9 of the history books, only 4 of them address this issue, and at that, only half a page spoke about the Mexican Repatriation Act. And I also learned that it was pretty close to 2 million people that were deported, and almost 40% of these 2 million people were actually U.S. citizens of Mexican descent. So why was it that these U.S. citizens, being U.S. citizens, were deported?
I think that, this was purely a racist campaign, right? And so they didn't see a difference between somebody that was an American citizen but of Mexican descent or a Mexican national. People were often deported or repatriated for looking brown, for looking Mexican. And so they weren't asked to present any kind of identification or papers. They were simply deported for looking Mexican. There was a saying at the time, and this is printed in newspapers, a Mexican is a Mexican. So they didn't see any difference, regardless if somebody was born in Mexico or if they were born in the United States. And there are no exact numbers. They say close to 1.8 million people were sent back to Mexico during this time. But there weren't official records kept, right? They were just sending people back. And so that number is an estimate.
Yes, that brings to mind that also I was reading that when this was being enacted in 1929, 30, then there was like a mass hysteria of people that they thought that everybody who was brown, they had to be just deported, whether they were born here or not. And also the idea was that the Mexicans were inferior to the Anglo, that they were less smart.
Right.
And then
right. A term that you'll hear, like if you look back at newspaper clippings from 1931, specifically with newspapers that were approving of local governments and the Hoover administration doing this, they would call Mexicans peons, for example, insinuated that they were lazy, that they were, bleeding their local governments dry. And of course, I think why this is an important piece of our history is because we see the same thing repeating itself, right? Just a few years ago, not just a few years ago, but, when Trump was running his presidential campaign, we heard him use a lot of derogatory and racist language to describe not only Mexicans, but immigrants coming from Central America. And so we see this, 90 years have passed, but unfortunately, we're still dealing with a lot of these issues.
Deja vu all over again,
yes,
right?
Unfortunately.
And did these massive deportations help with the Great Depression?
There is no evidence that they did. There is no evidence that hardworking Americans were able to secure jobs. There's no evidence that city governments were able to save money. This was purely a group of people in power that were looking to blame their problems on a group of people that could not defend themselves.
Yes, and that also brings to mind the situation nowadays with the farm workers, people that come here by the season or live here, but they do their agricultural work, and people forget, that our food comes from their labor, and I hear so often, they should go back home, deported. But I wonder if these same people who want them out, would they be willing to do the job that they do? Because that is such hard work to work at a farm.
It's hard work.
Where I live, sometimes I have to drive by places where there are big agricultural fields. And it's hot in the summer, and I see them bent down, picking up fruits and vegetables. And I think to myself, God, there's no way I could do that job. However, we still have the racism. It's just based on our color, and not even thinking that it would be to their detriment if they were all deported. Right?
What would happen to our economy without these hardworking immigrants that are literally fueling and putting food on our tables?
Exactly. Yes, that's. Yeah. And I was also wondering, what was the procedure on these deportations? Did they give them a week, 2 weeks to get ready, prepare to leave to Mexico?
It's important to note that this was happening all over the country. So a lot of the repatriation, the main hub for it was Los Angeles County, which is where my family is. But it was happening all over the Southwest, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, and it was happening in the Midwest, Michigan, and as far east as Pennsylvania. So this was happening all over the country. There were deportation raids. So they would go into businesses and deport people. They would show up at a park on a Sunday afternoon when families were just getting together to enjoy a picnic or a soccer game, and they would pick people up, and they wouldn't ask for papers. And this was all on the basis of whether or not they had brown skin. There was also a certain point where they were fear-mongering and instilling such a fear in people that they wanted to leave. So what local governments were doing, and this was happening a lot in Los Angeles County, is that they were offering people train tickets to repatriate themselves to Mexico with the promise that this would all blow over and that they would be able to come back. And unfortunately, this wasn't true. And so you did have some people that elected to repatriate themselves. They received train fare and they boarded repatriation trains from the U.S. back to Mexico, or they were forcibly deported.
And let's go into your family experience. What happened to them?
So in 1931, this was really at the height of the repatriation. 1931 was the year that the most people were deported or repatriated from Los Angeles County. My family was unfortunately part of that group. My great-grandmother named Paula and Jose, they were immigrants from a town in northern Jalisco called Santa Maria de en Medio. And they had come to the U.S. freely because my great-grandfather had been working on the railroads throughout the Southwest. And they were very much seduced by the promise of work and better opportunities in Southern California. There was not only the railroad work, but in a town called San Pedro, which is close to Los Angeles Harbor. There was longshoreman work. There was factory work. So my great-grandmother worked in a sardine factory, canning sardines day in and day out. So they moved to Southern California from Mexico. But unfortunately, just the fear-mongering that was happening, my great-grandmother didn't feel comfortable. She never learned English. She was very much scared. She didn't feel wanted. She felt ashamed. And so she decided to take advantage of one of these repatriation campaigns. And she took two of her children, my grandmother Celia and my great-uncle, who I never met, Pablo. They were American citizens, and they all went back together. They left my great-grandfather in San Pedro because he was very much a patriot. He was very proud to be an immigrant working in America, and he believed in the promise that he saw in the United States, and he felt convinced that this would all blow over. So he decided to stay, and this was obviously a huge conflict between the two of them because my great-grandmother took the children back to Mexico. And unfortunately, this journey was really hard. It was a perilous journey. It was a hard journey. And my great-uncle Pablo did not survive the journey. He was 2 years old, and he died. And so this is very much something that has stayed a part of my family's history, the fact that they had to go back to Mexico during this time because there was such an atmosphere and an environment of hate and racism.
And your grandmother, did she come back?
She did. They were, I guess you could say they fared well, if you can say that. They came back to the United States. They were only in Mexico for less than a year. We don't know how they were able to come back. This is something that I'm working to piece together and understand through the one-woman play that I'm writing. But my great-grandfather was obviously devastated that his son died, that he was separated from his family. So him and his brother went back to Mexico looking for my great-grandmother and my grandmother, and they were able to bring them back. We don't know how that happened because it was a very dangerous time. And unfortunately, after they were able to come back, they wanted to just put their heads down and live their lives in the United States. And this is something that has happened with a lot of families that experience the repatriation. They wanted to put this horrible, shameful experience behind them, and they wanted to become a part of American culture and just forget about it. And so it was something that wasn't talked about. I'm sure that they endured trauma from this, right? Being separated from your family, not feeling wanted on either side of the border. I think one thing that my grandmother remembered was just, even though she spoke Spanish and her parents were Mexican, when she was in Mexico, she was told that she was a pocha, that she wasn't a real Mexican. And so to feel like you're not wanted in either place, I mean, that's a lot
right,
to endure.
Exactly. And how have these experiences affected you? Who or how do you see yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that, again, I'm a third generation Mexican American, so this happened to my family 2 generations ago, and it's something that we still talk about. I've realized that I sometimes feel like I don't belong. I think part of this is because I'm a theater artist, but I've led a very nomadic existence in a way, trying to search for home, trying to search for where I belong. I'm a pretty quiet person. My dad's also quiet. These were his parents and his grandparents that went through that. And so I think part of my research and writing about this and being able to perform that is just recognizing that there is intergenerational trauma that comes with all of this. And even though it happened 90 years ago, I think my dad, myself, my brother, I think that this is something that's a part of our DNA. And we're carrying it with us. And so part of my goal in researching this and bringing it to light through the show that I'm writing is to heal. Not only to bring visibility, but to find healing from it.
And I know that you just told me you're a singer.
Yes.
What kind of music do you sing? Do you sing corridos, as you mentioned to me, but besides the corridos, do you also?
Yeah, so when I was a little kid, so I got into acting and theater through singing. I used to sing in my church choir, and then when I was 9 years old, I begged my parents to let me audition for a musical called The King and I, and I was cast, and I never looked back. So I started in musical theater. I took voice lessons. I was classically trained. And it wasn't until I got older that I really got interested in Mexican music. I remember when I was a little kid and my parents would play corridos, or like my mom's dad was from Texas, so he loved Tejano music. And I didn't really like it when I was a kid, but now as an adult, I love it and have such an appreciation for it. Music was a huge part of my father's family. So my grandfather played the guitar. He sang. My grandmother sang. My great-grandfather, who I do talk about in the play, he was a musician as well. And so part of me singing and learning how to play an instrument myself has been my journey in like reconnecting with my musical heritage and my cultural heritage.
Yeah. What you just told me reminded me that that's how I used to feel when I was younger also. And I think this might happen with a lot of immigrants.
Yes.
Because when you're young and you're planning on someday going to the United States, you, along with that desire, you like their language, you like their music. So I remember I used to love the rock, everything in English, of course, and I did not want to know anything about with my own music from my own country until many years later, as I became older. I see the change little by little. I started to become reacquainted with my culture, with my music, and you start to like shed all these layers of being or wanting to be more of a North American person, and then you started to long for your own culture and appreciate it. And I'm at that point again now where I do love my music, the music from my country, and it's such a great feeling, you know, to feel proud of it. Now you're gonna sing to us corrido. What is a corrido?
Yes. So the name of the show that I'm writing is called Olvidados, a Mexican American Corrido. And I would describe a corrido as a traditional Mexican folk song. It's like oral history set to music. So corridos would, tell the tale of a heroic person in Mexican culture. So, for example, there's corridos written during the Mexican Revolution, about the Adelitas, for example, the female soldiers that were fighting in that war. They often tell a tale of warning, lessons to be learned, things to not be repeated. And so the play that I wrote uses the corrido to tell my family's story, to tell the story of the repatriation, and to also fill in the gaps where history or information is missing. And so there are traditional corridos in the show, and then there are also different types of Latin music represented in the show. I want to give a shout out to my collaborator, Moisés Vázquez, who is an amazing musician and composer, and he composed the music for Olvidados. And so he was really interested in playing with different genres of Latin music in the show. So, for example, we have a cumbia, we have a bolero. So it's not just corridos.
Very good, good.
Yes.
Well, would you like to sing something for us, please?
Yes. I'll tell you a little bit about the song.
Sure.
So the first song that I'm going to sing, it's a corrido, and it's called El Silencio. And this song happens at the beginning of the show. So El Silencio means the silence. And the reason why we named it that is because there is a lot of silence around the repatriation, not only historically, but within families that this has happened to. So this is just about the silence of that experience, the shame of having dreams that don't come true, the shame of losing a part of yourself, of losing a language. So just sort of encapsulating the experience of what it is to be a Mexican American.
Very good.
El silencio dice hay cosas que mejor es no saber. El silencio shrugs y dice, that's the way it happened. El silencio is the weight of those who've gone before us. El silencio is the shame of broken dreams. El silencio is a language lost, a connection to the past. El silencio's to assimilate and give up a part of yourself. El silencio es dolor, el silencio es vergüenza, el silencio es enfado y memoria. El silencio se oye fuerte, fuerte se oye el silencio. A grito full of rage and pain explodes to heal the past. Y así es como pasó. Así es como pasó. The cycle is now broken. We can face the past and color our voices with loss. We can color our voices with pride. I come from a dark well of silence, and out of that deep dark well, I carry my community with me into the light. El silencio breaks, we become bigger. Generations of the silence detonate. Y así El silencio dice, ya está bien, ya está bien, dice el silencio.
Beautiful. I love the message. Yes, me encanta, me encanta. So about this show, the Olvidados, Mexican American Corrido.
Yes.
Tell me about that. When, where, what time, what's going to happen?
Absolutely. So it is a staged reading of my solo show, Olvidados, a Mexican American Corrido. I wrote the show. The music is composed by Moisés Vázquez. He also wrote the additional lyrics. I'll be joined on November 17th and 18th by Natalie Vicencio, who will be reading stage directions and who will also be joining me as a singer. And then by Juan Carlos Carpio, who is going to be the guitarist. And then Dr. Priscilla Maria Page, who is also on faculty at UMass Amherst, is the dramaturg for the production. So this is happening at CitySpace in the Blue Room on November 17th and 18th at 7 p.m. Excuse me.
7 p.m.
Yes.
So 2 days in a row.
Yes.
Very
And this
well.
is a staged reading because I'm trying new things with the script, so it's a new work in development. And each reading will be followed by a talk back with the audience, which will be facilitated by Dr. Page. We would love to know how this story resonates with audiences, and obviously I would love feedback from the audience on ways to continue to develop the play.
Wow, that sounds really good.
Yes.
Before we end our conversation, would it be
Yes.
okay to listen to another song?
Yes, absolutely. So this one is called In My Dreams. This is sort of a mix between a corrido and a waltz. And what the song is about is I often see my family, my ancestors that I didn't know in my dreams. So this is sort of about seeing their pictures, seeing them in my dreams, and imagining what their lives were like, even though I didn't know them.
In my dreams, black and white photos come to life. Young women singing, cigarette smoke. In my dreams, in my dreams, in my dreams, José's violin sings his joys and sorrows. Viejitos play their corridos at night, each song a fight for a better tomorrow. What is a better life? What parts of yourself did you leave behind? What new identities did you embrace? What sacrifices had to be made? Oh, what sacrifices had to be made? In my dreams, black and white photos come to life.
What a beautiful song.
Thank you so much.
I love that line, when the viejitos come at night to sing.
Yes.
The corridos. Such a beautiful line.
Thank you so much.
You wrote this song.
I wrote this song, and I collaborated with the composer and co-lyricist Moisés Vázquez. And so he actually, that was his line, viejitos play their corridos at night, because he felt a lot of connection to this song as well.
Yes.
And that's part of his experience, is just watching the viejitos in the neighborhood play their instruments.
And the viejitos means?
Little,
elderly.
yes,
Little
elderly,
know,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
It has been such a pleasure
Thank you
to
so
have
much.
you here as my guest. Thank you for sharing your beautiful music.
Thank you.
And wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.